Hi everyone and welcome to Spyglass Comics. Today I'm going to be covering Daredevil Born Again, which was created back in 1986, and it's a piece of work that combines Frank Miller's writing, his very sort of tight crime fiction-esque characters and plotline and dialogue, with the elegant but I think also very powerful artwork of David Mazzucchelli, who I think is a really underrated comic book artist. So from the front cover of the graphic novel, you really get a sense of the many myriad characters and themes within Daredevil Born Again. You get Daredevil and Karen Page seemingly kind of flying through the air or leaping to safety. And against that, you have this fantastic stained glass image of characters such as Sister Maggie, Foggy Nelson and Gloria, Captain America, Nuke, Ben Urich, but most importantly, at the very bottom, consuming what looks like souls in hell, is Kingpin. As we see, he's really Daredevil's nemesis. He's always thought of, I think, as Daredevil's #1 archenemy. So we begin the series with a very, very disturbing image of Karen Page, who's the former secretary of the Nelson and Murdoch law firm and former girlfriend of Matt Murdoch. She's left that career to pursue one which is an acting career, but she's fallen on hard times. She's become a porn actress, she becomes a heroin addict, and is basically reduced to starring in pornographic films in Mexico. And strapped for cash and obviously trying to feed a horrific heroin addiction, she sells the information that Matt Murdoch is Daredevil for a shot of heroin. So we see later on this information is then brought forward to Kingpin. Kingpin doesn't react straight away, however, which is what I love about Frank Miller's writing. Kingpin seeks to test the information, and it isn't elaborated upon. But over the next 6 months in the course of the story, the Kingpin uses his kind of malevolent influence to do things like, freeze Murdoch's accounts, the bank foreclosed on his apartment, and crucially, and possibly most damningly, Police Lieutenant Nicholas Manalis claims that he saw Murdoch pay a witness to perjure himself in a case. So obviously that's a huge thing that completely attempts to destroy Matt Murdoch's character, his reputation as a lawyer. Plus, we've also got this sort of backstory, which isn't really alluded to too heavily in the graphic novel, that Murdoch's girlfriend, Gloriana O'Brien, has broken up with him, and she actually starts to date his law partner and best friend, Foggy Nelson, on the rebound. So all these things are kind of combining together. It's a real maelstrom of horrible events that Matt Murdoch he's no control over. He's trying to fight against all of this, and his initial investigations uncover that Manalis is helping to frame Murdoch in exchange for help with his son, who's got some problem with his heart. He's got a really bad heart condition. But he doesn't know who is actually behind the frame up, who is the mastermind behind this, and he doesn't really want to turn Manalis into the authorities or go too heavy on him until he knows this. Thankfully, Foggy Nelson and him do kind of combine, and Nelson saves Murdoch from a jail term, although he's barred from practicing law. So with this initial plan foiled, Kingpin has Murdoch's apartment firebombed. And it's a really pivotal moment in the story. It's a culmination of months of Matt Murdoch's life being torn upside down. But until that point, Murdoch doesn't really know who's behind it all. But at that moment, he realizes it's the Kingpin. And he actually says in it, you didn't need to sign it. You didn't need to sign your name to this, Kingpin. I know it's you now. But unfortunately, Matt becomes really paranoid and very aggressive, and he's also, at this stage, he's being followed by the Kingpin's kind of subordinates, who kind of give the Kingpin updates on Matt Murdoch's mental state. And so I think, again, one of the scenes that really shows how fat Matt has fallen, or Daredevil has fallen, is he's on a subway train. A group of youths enter the train and start to rob and mug the passengers on the train. Matt Murdock does nothing. He just looks ahead, he doesn't really do anything. But when one of them brandishes a gun in front of his face, he responds and he goes to town on him. You know, the fractured jaws, heads punched against glass windows. When the train stops, however, the most damning part of this is a police officer is also attacked by Matt Murdock. So the police officer obviously goes to question what's going on here, and he's also attacked. The Kingpin absolutely relishes hearing this information. He's almost beside himself with joy. You know, he feels that he's really destroying Matt Murdock. He's destroying someone who's always stood up against him. At this point as well, or shortly after, Matt Murdock is living in these really, really dodgy hotels, really flea bag kind of motels, where you can get a change for $10 a night, and he decides he's gonna face Kingpin, and he even is leaving weird messages on answer phones that he's gonna kill Kingpin, and it turns out that it's like the speaking clock. So eventually, Murdock confronts the Kingpin in his office. At this stage, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, he's actually lost any sense of defeating Kingpin by legitimate reasons, either through the law. Obviously, he's been sort of disbarred, but he could have obviously got information on Kingpin, or maybe tried to get him to admit to this. But also, he's in terms of combat, he's just lashing out wildly. Kingpin defeats him easily, and it gives him an absolutely brutal beating, to the point where Matt loses consciousness. He's then drenched in whiskey and strapped into a stolen taxi cab, which is then pushed into the East River. So at this stage, you know, Kingpin's victory, he thinks his victory is complete. He's humbled Matt Murdock. He's driven him to a state of mental paranoia. He's brutally beaten him in combat, and now as far as Kingpin's concerned, he's killed him. He's destroyed the only good man that he's ever known. Fortunately, however, Matt Murdock regains consciousness, manages to break out of the cab and swim to safety. At that point, Kingpin, this is weeks after the disappearance of Matt Murdock, the cab is found, photographs are taken of the scene where the seatbelt has been cut with broken glass, and 2 or 3 times Kingpin repeats the phrase to himself in this kind of thought processes, "There is no corpse. There is no corpse." So at that stage, Kingpin is beginning to think, okay, there may be a problem here. So at the end of that pivotal scene where there's the taxi wreckage and Kingpin realizes that Matt Murdock has survived. He's survived the crash. He's survived the frame up. He realizes that Murdock is alive somewhere. Murdock is alive. And there's a scene where he's training with these kind of jiu-jitsu or judo masters, and that's kind of the only dialogue in his head is about Matthew Murdock. So Kingpin asks his local aide, Wesley, to locate Nuke. I'm not quite sure who Nuke is, but Wesley's reaction is, boss, you can't be serious. You can't be serious about Nuke. But of course, Kingpin being Kingpin, I'm not inviting a debate here, Wesley. Get me Nuke. Meanwhile, there's so much going on. Again, it's testimony to Frank Miller that he can weave such a complex plot together. Nick Manalis he's eventually killed by Nurse Lois. Ben Urich, actually, who's sitting in the Daily Bugle at the time, talking to Nick Manalis, he hears his strangled cries, and David Mazzucchelli's depiction of Urich's face is almost reminiscent of Edward Munch's Scream. It's absolutely horrific. And again, Mazzucchelli is just, he's an incredible artist. And again, Miller's plotline weaves through myriad characters and subplots at this point. There's Matt's ongoing rehabilitation. So he's survived and is being cared for by Sister Maggie. There's his ex-girlfriend, Karen Page, who again sold him out for a shot of heroin. And she's trying to escape the clutches of her jealous and psychotic lover. And there's a threat posed by Nurse Lois now on Ben Urich himself. So include a psychotic lunatic dressed as Daredevil and unleashed by Kingpin to kill Foggy Nelson, and there's barely time to draw a breath. Again, that's what Miller brings, a real pace to the story, and it's beautifully executed again by Mazzucchelli. Finally, the arrival of the deranged super soldier Nuke in Hell's Kitchen indicates just how desperate Kingpin has become. So despite Wesley's reservations, they've gone ahead and they've acquired Nuke from these corrupt army officials. Gunfire and rocket grenades destroyed lives as well as half of Hell's Kitchen as Nuke just essentially tears the place apart through machine guns, rocket launchers. As I said, he's a super soldier, so they've used the same serum more or less that Captain America, Steve Rogers became Captain America via the super soldier program. So his skin's kind of very synthetic, it's very tough. But this really signals the beginning of the end for Kingpin as Daredevil and Captain America manage to bring him down, and Captain America sort of uncovers the sort of plot and the corruption within the American military. And it really starts to shine a light on Kingpin's reign of terror and the atrocities that he's committed on the city. Again, one of the pivotal moments is, and visually stunning moments is, the sort of bloody corpse of Nuke is taken by Daredevil to the Daily Bugle. There's no time to save him, but Daredevil kind of figures, well, there's one more purpose you can serve Nuke. He takes him to the Daily Bugle, and so the next few weeks go really badly for the Kingpin. It's almost like a role reversal where, this happened to Matt Murdock at the start, where things started to unravel for him. It's now beginning to happen for the Kingpin. And his veneer of respectability that the Kingpin had sort of spent years trying to cultivate with the kind of respectable business community is beginning to crumble and it's essentially destroyed by rumour and by these stories in the press. And we're left with the Kingpin fighting eventually, charges through the courts. And his only real solace is that he took the law away from Matt Murdock. So he still clings on to this sense that I destroyed a good man. I ruined his life. And yes, I didn't kill him. At least I've taken that away from him. But the final page, which I think, final full page rendering by Mazzucchelli, leaves us with a kind of a smiling Matt Murdock and Karen Page walking arm in arm in Hell's Kitchen. And it's one of full of optimism and full of hope for the future. And we get a sense that whatever the Kingpin throws at him, Matt Murdock is ready. He's overcome death almost. He's overcome the loss of property, possession, his love of the law and his ability to use that in his career. But he couldn't take away what made Matt Murdock become Daredevil, what made him become such an extraordinary individual. So it's a remarkable piece of work, probably on a superhero that maybe, it's not that Daredevil is a minor character, I think, in the Marvel canon. Obviously we have the TV series, we've had a movie, which wasn't great, but I think as a graphic novel, Daredevil Born Again is a real work of art. And again, I'm not really even touching on some of the themes present within it. There's, again, going back to the stained glass window at the beginning and the kind of front cover of the graphic novel. There's Sister Maggie, there's sort of definite sense of redemption, purgatory within the story, and resurrection as well. The resurrection of Matt Murdock as a man who was driven to the brink of death and destruction by the Kingpin, and he's found a new life. And I think that's probably the most powerful thing you sort of get out of the story, is that there is always a chance for redemption. So thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to this sort of inaugural Spyglass Comics first YouTube video. Hopefully I will get better. Hopefully I will get better as a narrator. I hope to bring more analysis, maybe better structure. Again, if you have any comments or opinions, what I could do better for the future, I'd love to hear it. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. And as I say, hit that subscribe button if you like what you hear. If you want to hear more upcoming stories. Quite tempted to maybe do Batman Year One as a next piece. Again, if you have any suggestions or comments, make them in the comments below. Thanks for your time.